Hello BookTube, welcome to my channel Polyglot Reading. My name is David, and on my channel I usually talk about literary classics of the Italian, German, English, French or Yiddish literature. Books which I have usually read in the original language, but which I would like to bring to the attention also to readers in other languages. Today I'm doing the classical music tag. This tag was developed by Will Chambers, who also tagged me, and I'm a great fan of classical music, so I very much like this tag. I have to do it. And so it consists of only 4 prompts, and each of the prompts mentions a specific piece of classical music that symbolizes a specific mood or event, and then asks for literary connections. And as this is about classical music, I've tried to come up with literary classics for all of the prompts. It may be lesser known classics, but I think all would really qualify as classics. Okay, let's get started. Prompt number 1, Edvard Grieg's Peer Gynt Suite number 1, Opus 46, Morning Mood. What type of book, be it fiction, non-fiction, prose or poetry, could or do you read first thing in the morning? Alternatively, if you're not a morning reader, what book do you think has a great morning scene? Now, I'm not a morning reader at all. I'm a night owl, so I love to read at night, but in the morning, no, I need I need lots of coffee and quiet and peace and time to wake up. But reading is impossible for me in the morning. So I decided to take the alternative route here and to look for a book that has a great morning scene. And a book that has actually a couple of great morning scenes is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This is an illustrated edition by the Folio Society, and this is a small literary gem. The plot is shortly after the First World War, a young man who had served as a soldier in the army and has gone through all these atrocities and has experienced all this battlefield, a traumatic experience of destruction, of annihilation, of murder, of bloodshed. And now he tries to return to normal life. And as a first action, he took on a job to restore a piece of art, an old painting in an old church in the country. And this little book describes the therapeutic effect of living in the country, sticking to the simple things in life and working closely with a lot of patience in restoring a piece of art, that the curative effect that this has on the mental health of this young man. And he is not alone around the same church. Actually in the churchyard, there's another young man who is doing some archaeological excavations there. And also this person seems to have a troubled background, and there's a lot of interaction and dialogue also between the two of them. But there's also a romantic story. There is with a nice young wife of the local reverend, which complicates things a bit. Okay, I don't want to tell you too much. I would highly recommend you to read this book. I would just like to read 2 short extracts of 2 morning scenes in the book. The first scene is the first morning after the young man had arrived, and when he comes out of his little chamber that he has in the belfry tower and enters the churchyard. Okay. The rain had ceased, and dew glittered on the graveyard grass. Gossamer drifted down air currents. A pair of blackbirds picked around after insects. A thrush was singing where I could see him in one of the ash trees. And beyond lay the pasture I had crossed on my way from the station. Then more fields rising towards a dark rim of hills. And, as it lightened, a vast and magnificent landscape unfolded. I turned away. It was immensely satisfying. What an idyllic morning scene. And There's another scene, just I think one or two chapters later, that describes this sort of a morning ritual that this young man who is busy with restoring the painting has with the other young man who is doing the archaeological excavations and living in a tent. I quote, "That was a fairly typical beginning to most days. A mug of tea in Moon's dugout, usually not saying much, while he had a pipe. I'd ask him how things were going, who'd looked into his hole. Then he'd ask me how things were going up my ladder, who had wandered across to the church, and now and then, through pipe smoke, he would look speculatively at me. Now, who are you? Who have you left behind in the kitchen? What befell you over there to give you that god-awful twitch? Are you here to try to crawl back into the skin you had before they pushed you through the mincer?" I saw his questions, but didn't answer them. Not because I lacked candor, but because talking wouldn't help. They told me that only time would clean me up, and I believed them. Okay, that's another morning scene, less about nature, but about human interaction as a sort of morning ritual. Let's move on to the second prompt. A musical piece by the German composer Richard Wagner, Walkürenritt, or English, Ride of the Valkyries. A book you enjoyed where the protagonist dies or an important death or funeral takes place. So, I would like to present a book where not the protagonist dies, but the mother of the protagonist and his uncle, who is most likely also his biological father. And that's the novel The Tin Drum by the German author Günter Grass, who was the Nobel Prize laureate in 1999. Unfortunately, I only have the original German version here, but there are English translations available, so no problem for you to get one. This novel was published in 1959, and if you're looking for one of the most important modern classics of the German literature in the 20th century, then this is a novel for you. This is the novel to go. In a nutshell, it's the story of a sort of a weird child, Oskar Mazerat, who grows up in the Danzig area, which is sort of a border region between Germany and Poland, very complicated political and ethnic situation there. And he grows up during the Third Reich, and also his life after the Third Reich is described. He grows up in a dysfunctional family, in a dysfunctional society, and the important deaths in the book are the death of his mother and of his uncle Jan, who is actually the cousin of his mother and also the lover of his mother, and so presumably is also the biological father of Oscar. So you see where the dysfunctionality is in this family, and it gets worse. The novel is narrated by Oscar himself as first-person narrator, and he claims to have had an adult mind at his early childhood age from the very beginning, and to have always had a full understanding of everything that went on around him. And with that clearness of analytical powers, he describes also his very early childhood years. And at the age of 3 years, Oscar decides that he's not going to grow anymore. And so for decades, his outward appearance remains that one of a 3-year-old boy, and that is also a perfect disguise for him to do all sorts of things and also all sorts of mischief and go unnoticed. And so, for example, he becomes the secret lover of his father's second wife, and he lives unscathed throughout the Third Reich and the World War II, where he joins a group of performing dwarfs that entertain the German troops at the front line. And after the war, he becomes the leader of a criminal youth gang, and then he works as a stones mason, doing engraving works on tombstones. He becomes a member of a famous jazz band, and much more. It's a very unique perspective on the German society during the Third Reich and the post-war area, and highly satirical. I think you have noticed that this disguise of a 3-year-old child is just a means to create some very caustic satire also, and but it also very, very comical. And as a reader, you should always be very careful. So Oscar is the archetype of an unreliable narrator. So at the very beginning, we learn that he is institutionalized in a hospital specialized on mental health issues. And in this situation, he starts writing his memoirs. So everything that he writes, you should be suspicious about it and take it just with a pinch of salt. Okay, let's move on to the third question. Now, by the way, there's also a great film adaptation of the book. The Tin Drum was done in the 1970s and by Volker Schlöndorff. It cannot cover everything that goes on in this very thick novel, but I think it's really a congenial film adaptation because it excellently succeeds in delivering the very atmosphere of the book and its characters. Okay, but now let's move on to the third question. And the piece of classical music he mentioned is here by the German composer Johann Pachelbel, Canon and Gigue in D major. Which book did you enjoy which has a wedding that you wish you could attend? So first, this connection between this piece of music and a wedding was interesting to me. Maybe this is a peculiarity of the Anglo-Saxon, in the Anglo-Saxon culture. I would not associate this piece of music with weddings. Actually, it's that sort of musical piece that I would like to have played at my funeral once my turns here on earth comes to an end, because I think it delivers this perfect equilibrium between melancholy on the one hand, but also gratefulness and joy, exactly that mixture that I would like to convey to my family and friends once I have passed away. But anyway, so the prompt asks for a book with a wedding scene. Actually, I would like to mention the French novel Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. So I think we all know that this marriage is not ending in a good way. So actually, this is also a novel suitable for the second prompt, where protagonist dies, and there's adultery in there, and a final suicide, and so on. But the wedding scene described here is really hilarious, and it's you have to read it. I won't read it now, but it's described in a very interesting and attractive way. Luxurious eating and luxurious atmosphere and good food in abundance. So I would have loved to be there at this wedding and to be able to eat at least a part of all the delicatessen that are mentioned in here. Okay, so we are already almost at the end. Prompt number 4. Again, the German composer, Gustav Holst, The Planets, Opus 32, number 4, Jupiter, the Bringer of Jollity. A book or series which poignantly moves through phases. Yeah, I would like to mention a real forgotten classic. That's a novel by the Polish author Władysław Reymont. His novel The Peasants. It is a novel in 4 parts, and the 4 parts are named according to the season. It starts with autumn, winter, spring, and summer. And the author and the novel are almost forgotten nowadays, but actually Vladislav Raymond was the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature exactly 100 years ago, 1924. Right. So there's something to celebrate. And he was awarded the Nobel Prize mostly for exactly this novel, The Peasants. And I think it's a great novel. It's a very colorful picture of country life at the end of the 19th century, and when the old patriarchal system with its structures and old customs becomes questioned by the younger generation, and when modernization and industrialization start to influence also the rural societies. And it's a picture of the complex relationships in a village of about 40 farmers, and it gives a very detailed account how the nature and its cycles, the seasons, are essential for all aspects of human and societal life in this country, in this rural area. And we follow the whole society of the village, but often we focus into one specific family, into the family of the most wealthy farmer, Mateusz Borina, and his family. And we see that all the human passions and vices and virtues are there in that family, or the extended family. So we have love and hate and jealousy and greed, but also acts of charity. We have egotism, but also love and dedication and self-renunciation. So one of the key drivers of the action around the Borina family is that the 60-year-old widower, Mateusz Borina, marries for a second time, and he marries a very young girl named Wagner, who is actually the secret lover of his oldest son, Antek, who is, by the way, already married. He's a married father of 2 children. And you can imagine that this brings a lot of tension and complication into the family structure, but also into the whole society. That sort of scandals into this village society. It's it's a very nice novel, and I also have a very nice edition. This is actually a 100-year-old German translation, published in 1923. All 4 volumes. Very nicely decorated and printed in this old-fashioned German or Gothic script that was the usual way of printing books in German until the early 1940s. And but there's also an English translation available. Actually, there's a new English translation available. There was an old one, but I think it's a bit outdated. And at the end of 2022, a new English translation of this this literary milestone of European literature was published. I'll put the cover up here to provide a link in the show notes of this video. I think this 100-year-old novel is really worth to be rediscovered, and this author has written a lot of other things, also short stories. Maybe one day I'll make a video about Vladislav Raymond. But for today, it should be sufficient to promote this novel, Peasants by Vladislav Raymond. Bestseller 100 years ago, and the reason why Vladislav Raymond won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Will Chambers, for creating this tag and for tagging me. Thanks to you for watching. I would like to tag a few people. I would like to take Libby from Libby's Lit, which is a quite new and very interesting channel. Libby does very thoughtful and profound reviews, also often on literary classics, and please make sure to check out her channel. And I would like to tag Pat from Book Chat with Pat. I'm not sure, but I think she's also the type who has a connection with classical music, and I would love to draw connections between classical music and great pieces of literature. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've liked this video, please give me a like or leave a comment. If you want to discuss any of the books mentioned here, that would be a great pleasure for me. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye and ciao.